As you will hear, so from my very nice Bostonian accent, I'm French. I'll try to be as understandable as I can. So you may wonder why a 125-year-old company is coming and wants to play into additive. And what I'm trying to do is to explain you why. And I think there are many, many reasons that we want to be into this ecosystem, because we really think it's an ecosystem. It's not only printing parts, it's all which is around it. And this is what I'm going to try to explain and share with you. And I hope you will like it. I think there have been many, many steps in the productions and in the supply chains over the past century. But I think this one, and I do believe it, and from the top of the organization in GE, from Jeff Immelt, David Joyce, myself, and all the business leaders, we really believe that's going to be a revolution and not an evolution. And that additive, together with digital and with some other type of input, would be a real revolution, and that the supply chain will look totally differently from what it is today in 10 years from now, or maybe 15 years. But it's going to be much faster than everybody can think. We believe that there is a big potential because the entire ecosystem is there. Let me put things into perspective. First of all, we're in a world where the supply chain is under a lot of constraints. If you look at the political environment, you know, we had elections in France last week. You had the Brexit, Trump elections. So there are many, many changes. And us as industrial have to move fast and faster to be able to cope with the needs of the different customers that we have. Needs in terms of localizations, needs in terms of policy, on how to face the policies that are implemented in different countries. And that's a real challenge. And I think that for the first time, we have an ecosystem that really allows to do so. Of course, you have robotics and automation, and that's not new. Actually, I don't look that young, and my first job was installing robots on a production line of an automotive company back in the 1980s. And since then, so we have installed a lot of robots. Not a major change, so they were robots, that's it. But I think today we have the collaborative robots, so there's going to be an additional change again, once again. Then you had advanced analytics. So my predecessor on the stage mentioned the digital twin. I really believe that it's a big change in the ecosystem. We're able now to predict what is going to happen in a part that we have printed and when it's going to fail on an aircraft engine, and how long we can keep these parts on the aircraft without creating any issue. So that's a real big change. And so the more we run analytics, the more we understand everything about material, about failure mode, and the more we are able to change the supply chain and to modify it. Augmented reality is also part of it. So we can bring the information to the point of use for all our operators on the line, on the shop floor. What was difficult to do 10 years ago, thanks to the cloud, thanks to the edge devices, we're able to provide to the operators all the information that they need to produce the parts right the first time. And additive is coming into the play. That's a big game changer. So you're following that since 25 years. Greg Morris, who was there yesterday on the stage, was one of the early adapters. He's the one who convinced us that we need to move in this direction. And that's going to be a big change. And again, when you have a big change on the supply chain, that has a huge impact on the workforce. If you think about it, additive may help us to print the parts where we need to use them, at the point of use. Huge impact on logistics, huge impacts on the warehouses, huge impacts on, by the way, cash utilization, working capital that we could reuse for new technologies. So it's a huge impact on the ecosystem. And for that, we will have to also help our workforce to adapt to that. We have 150,000 people working in the supply chain in GE. We need to prepare that. So this is what I'm going to try to depict in the next slides. So the way we look at it is we call it Brilliant Factory. Some are calling it Industry 4.0, whatever, so we'll call it Brilliant Factory. So, and it's based on 4 key pillars that we're using today in each and every factory. The first one is lean. So what is the relationship between lean and additive? You may wonder and say, oh, look, that's totally different. No, it isn't. It's really linked. We do believe that if you don't have a lean process in your factories, what you're going to do is you're going to automatize or print waste. And this is not what you want to do, because waste is what costs you tons of money and where you want to get productivity out. So really lean is the basic. I'll give you an example that applies to additive. If you look at the machines today, from whatever they're produced, desk metal may be a bit different, but so that's something that is pretty new. But if you look at the part, you print a part, it takes you 96 hours. But you have to really take care of the material handling on one side and how to cope with that, how to cope with contaminations. And on the other side, you have to take off the post-processing issues that you may face. And what you save with your 3D printers, you're losing it into your post-processing and the preparations of material. And this is by applying lean to it so that you get really the productivity that you need to have in the future. Digital is going to be a big change, and we are really investing heavily on that. And we believe that additive and digital goes hand to hand. And with our Predix platform, we'll be able to really develop something which is unique. Advanced manufacturing. Again, collaborative robots are going to change the world, and everybody is going in, and that's associated with additive will be also a big change. And finally, additive. So what we're doing today is we're preparing all our factories to be ready for additive. Be ready for additive, which is a big change. And the best way to do it today is to really assess how they do in lean and how they do in their digital transformations. And we assess all our factories, and we have more than 500 factories all over the world. We assess all of them according to this type of those 2 KPIs, lean and digital readiness. So we have set up a number of brilliant factories in the world now. Last year we started with 7 across the world, and now we're at 17. Those are factories that we take in different stages. They are not always lean, they are not always digital, but we want to see what will be the implications of moving them to lean, digital, and additive in the future. And we know that, so that's a good test, because we know whatever their position they are in, so we see what needs to be done, and it gives us the effort that everybody will have to do in terms of transformation to get there. I'll give you an example, and that's what we have noticed everywhere. And this one is a factory that we have in Japan. It's in our healthcare business. So they are producing CT scanners. We have done this assessment. They are very good in lean. So they have, even Toyota is coming and visiting them, so to see what they're doing in lean. So that's it's a good benchmark. And what we've seen is that thanks to digital, we could even further improve what they were doing. And again, reducing lead time, which is key for us, because that's where you can free up your working capital and you can reinvest in new technologies. Reducing also space floor, improving productivity big time. So we think that there is something, and then you're ready for additive. And that's something which is important. Moving to additive, I think that's, again, I think Greg has given some example yesterday. But this is really one thing I'm believing in, is to look at a system of parts rather than a part. And we have now a lot of examples where we have done that, and we have really tremendously changed the game. So additive, take one of these parts of an aircraft engine. So we had 300 parts. 60 engineers working on it. Today we have one part, one digital twin, to come back to the terminology, and 6 to 8 engineers working on it. We had 50 manufacturing sources for these given systems of part. We have one solutions and one manufacturing sourcing, one additive machines, and one inspection system. We had 5 repair sources, and in our business, repair is as important as Caterpillar, so that's a huge part of our business. And now we have one repair source. It's a big shift. It's a huge shift. And if you look at the implications on the supply chain and on the ecosystem, I think it's absolutely incredible. Look at the numbers of, when you have 300 parts that you need to transport all over the world, look at the numbers of companies that you're helping to develop business. Look at the numbers of suppliers. That's going to change everything. That's going to really change everything. So when you're able to print your part at the point of use, and you're able to really do the post-processing at the point of use, then you change the game totally. And we need to be ready for that. And I don't think it's going to happen in 20 years. I think it's going to happen in the 10 to next, maybe 15 years. But this is here. And what we see, and all the development we see from the additive company today, that's really here. And we need to be part of it. So another example is on the turboprop engine. And I think it's an interesting one. You know, we took a system of parts of 855 parts that we brought to 12 parts. So that means that on a turboprop engine of the future, 35% of the parts will be 3D printed. That's a big thing. It's also 5% of weight reduction. It's also 20% of lower emissions. And there are parts here, and there are technology improvement that we have introduced in this new engine that we couldn't do with the normal technology. And only additive was helping us to improve and get there. So how do we, as GE, approach that? So we look at it as an ecosystem. And as you know, we have invested in companies like Concept Lasers and Arcam. But I think we bring a little bit more. I think, as I said, we are 125 years old companies. So some people may say, so when you're 125 years old, you start to be slow. I don't think this is the case of GE, and I think we are doing a lot of things. But we have the experience of material. We are working with materials since 125 years. We have thousands of engineers working on materials for decades. And I think this is where we could add something to the party. Of course, machines and predicts, so that's the digital thread and the digital twin, are two things that we are really looking at. And then we hope that with all our global research center and the new companies that we have acquired, so we're able to bring something new into additive. And finally, and I think that it was mentioned pretty much, it's engineering. What we're doing now is that we have a crew of engineers that have already developed parts in additive for 3D printing. And this crew, we took them and we're training all our people in the different businesses and different engineers, because you need a lot of training. As it was mentioned earlier by Rick, there is no university teaching you how to design a part in 3D printing. So we have a part of know-how, and this is what we want to bring to our customer too, so the ability to design their part in a different way. And that's really part of what we can do. So we believe in this industry, and we are really sure that it's going to make a big difference. The things what we also believe in is that it's going to change what you have to do every day. And especially for the 150,000 people who are working in our supply chain and the things that are working in the engineering team. So we think that it's going to be a big change, and that we better prepare all those people to move into the new era or the new ecosystem. And this is why we have launched a month ago what we call the Brilliant Learning Framework, where we really teach to the people what is going to happen and how they can have the right evolutions into this ecosystem. And I think it's extremely important, because if we want this technology to be accepted on the shop floor, we better prepare the people to understand it. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, so we really think it's an ecosystem. And GE, through the GE Ventures, which is our investment arm, so we are investing in a lot of different companies. Some of them are here today, and I think Rick can mention it too. So we are investing in different companies because we're really believing that a lot of the ideas are coming from startups and companies that are really fast to grow creative technologies. So as a conclusion, and what I'd like to share and what I'd like you to keep from what I told you is, it's an industry disruption. The entire supply chain will be disrupted. It's going to be really different, and it's not only inside the wall of a manufacturing or inside the room of an engineering, it's going to be a disruption for the entire supply chain. We'll transport less parts, so the numbers of suppliers may have to reduce. So this is something where we will need to adapt. On the other hand, it's going to be an incredible potential for new value creations. We really believe that it will help people to invest in new concepts, in new products, faster, quicker, cheaper. And that will create a lot of new offerings that will compensate maybe the shrink of what the industrial disruption will bring. And I really believe in that. Finally, it's supercharged productivity. When you bring a system of parts of 855 parts to 12 parts, that's a massive productivity. That's a massive productivity. And that will change completely the way you look at service. It will change completely the way you look at the supply chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. That was fascinating. We do have the ability to take your questions. We have time for just a few questions for Philippe. And I actually have one already. Somebody's going ahead. How do you see value distribution in the additive manufacturing supply chain?
What do you mean by value distribution?
So how is value going to be like spread across all the different pieces of the supply chain now? Is it going to change? Or are those going to be different?
As I said, so there is a big shift in the value distribution. If you look at the supply chain today, I think you would be amazed. I don't know, it's maybe because we're not well organized in GE. And that can be, by the way. That can be. But you would be amazed by the amount of money we're spending in warehouses, in logistic costs, in moving things around the world. I made a simple calculation, but we have one of our products that I will not disclose here that goes 3 times around the world before it lands to a customer. And I'm not sure that we're the only one to do that. I think I see Caterpillar saying, yes, 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 yes. This is going to change. This is going to change. This is where you will print your parts in the future close to where you need to use it. So that's going to change the value distribution.
That's great. I would bet that there's a few GE suppliers in this audience. If there was one message that you could communicate to them about the future of manufacturing and how things are changing, what would that be?
I think be quick to adapt. I think we are all, in general, underestimating the speed at which evolution can come. And when I look at these small machines here, I don't think that anybody would have thought about, so maybe 5 years ago. That's going to change the thing. So you as a supplier needs to change. So again, so not the entire business model is going to be disrupted. So there's still there will be a big network of suppliers, but it may be different. And if you don't look at what would be the impact of additive today on your business model in the years to come, then you're in trouble. So I think you need to think about it right now.
That's great.
And invest.
Yes, and invest.
So that's for you.
And earlier today we had,
and for us, by the way.
Philippe was looking under the drape over here, and we said, well, you know, he said, no, we're investors in Desktop Metal, so that was pretty exciting. We hear a lot about GE with metals and metals 3D printing. What is GE doing, or what's their interest in polymers?
So far we have heavily focused on metal because we're using a lot of metal. So and this is where we have focused our effort. But we are looking at, so what do we need to do with polymers? So just coming. So I think that's going to be the next phase.
Next phase.
So I don't want to disclose when it's going to be, but that's.
That's great. This is a really good question that came through. In these brilliant factories, how do you change the culture? How do you bring the employees forward? How do they respond?
I think the way we want to change the culture here is really, first of all, I insist on the fact that a factory should be lean at the beginning. I used to say to my team, and I excuse my French in advance, but I say, if you digitize shit, you will produce shit. And that's what we're telling to the people. And we say, so look at the waste, eliminate the waste, and when the waste is eliminated, so what can we do with 3D printing, what can we do with robotization, and get prepared to that. And I have to tell you, so I was recently in one of our unionized plants in Canada, and so I was able to speak with them in French, so that was really interesting. And I had two guys there that were looking at what they were doing, and they were saying, say, look, with lean, with digital, all the information we get, we don't think that we need to be two in this position. I think we need to be one. And this is the behaviors that we want to see, and then we're hopefully being able to grow the volumes in this factory, and then they will get the job anyway. But they are progressing fast. And what we're trying to teach to the people and to the organization is, don't be afraid of it. Just play with it and be a contributor rather than something trying to stop it, because you will not stop it.
That's great. What would you say is the biggest challenge for GE in working in additive manufacturing?
So, I mean, it depends on where you stand. So, because GE is in this particular position now where we are a user, and then we provide equipment. I think as a user, and I think that's most certainly the same than everybody, it's all about what do you do when you want to print a part, about material handling. This is a solution, but that's not the only solution. How do you develop the parts? And if we now start to have an experience, we still believe that there are a lot of way to go. And then the third one, which is the post-processing. Because very often we think about 3D printing and it's done. It's not done at all, especially in our industry, because you have to heat the part, you have to heat treat the part, you have to coat the part, you have to check the parts. And all of that takes much more time than printing the parts. And this is what is the steps that are necessary, and also qualifying the equipment. How do you make sure that the parts that you're going to produce is going to be printed in the same way every time? And I think you would appreciate that we are very careful with what we do in an aircraft engine with this type of qualification. So that really helps.
That's right. We all got here somehow, right? We appreciate that. This is a comment, too. GE is leading incredible change for manufacturing. Thank you. That is a comment. Will Wall Street recognize this?
Most certainly one day.
That's great. Final thoughts, closing thoughts, anything you want to leave with the audience today? It's our last time.
No, first of all, I'm extremely proud to be able to present in front of you guys what GE is doing. and we're really a big believer in additive. We want to be a big partner in additive, and we want to be, again, to support the additive into the industry. So the only things you have to keep in mind, so if you think about additive, you can think about GE. Thank you very much.